It all started on a rainy Thursday afternoon in New York, the kind of day when the sky looks heavy but soft, when the city slows down just enough for two strangers to notice each other. Emma sat in the corner of a small coffee shop in Brooklyn, sketching room layouts in her worn-out notebook, headphones in, latte half empty, lost in her world of colors and shapes. Ryan walked in, shaking the rain off his coat, laptop in one hand, eyes scanning the room for an empty seat. There was only one left, right beside her. He smiled awkwardly, asking, "Mind if I sit?" And she nodded without looking up. But when she finally did, something in his face made her pause. Not his looks, but the calm in his eyes, like someone who'd seen too many storms but still believed in the sun. He ordered black coffee, and she made a quiet joke about how only people with broken hearts drink it without sugar. He laughed. That laugh changed everything. They talked first about work, then about music, and then about dreams that seemed too big for that tiny cafe table. By the time the rain stopped, they weren't tea strangers anymore. They were two souls who somehow felt like they had been waiting for this moment forever. In the following weeks, their connection grew like a melody, simple at first, then louder, warmer, richer. Emma showed Ryan her favorite art gallery downtown, where she used to sit for hours just watching people walk by, imagining their stories. Ryan took her to the rooftop of his apartment where he coded at night, showing her the skyline he said reminded him why he worked so hard. They weren't perfect, they were real, and maybe that's what made it beautiful. He loved how her hair always smelled like coffee and paint. She loved how he said "we" instead of "I" whenever they talked about the future. On their third date, he told her, "I want to build something that lasts." She smiled and whispered, "Then start with love." Those words would later echo in his mind, long after the laughter faded. Within months, wedding bells replaced the sound of rain. Their wedding was small, just family and a few close friends, but to them it felt like the world had stopped spinning just to watch them promise forever. The pictures from that day still looked like they were touched by sunlight. Her in a cream-white dress holding his hand like she'd never let go. Him smiling with that nervous kind of joy only true love can bring. They moved into a small brownstone house in Brooklyn. Their dream place, as Emma called it. The first night there, they unpacked boxes, strung fairy lights across the living room, and danced barefoot to old jazz records. The smell of pizza mixed with paint. Laughter echoed through half-empty rooms, and Ryan whispered, "This is home." Emma nodded, her eyes glistening. She believed him with all her heart. Days turned into weeks, and the house slowly became a reflection of their souls. Emma filled it with plants, Polaroids, and handmade art pieces. Every corner told a story. Ryan worked from a small desk by the window, often glancing at her while she hummed to herself. They had a ritual: Sunday breakfasts with pancakes, Tuesday movie nights, and every night before bed he'd hold her close and tell her, "You make life make sense." She'd laugh and say, "Then don't ever forget that." For a while it felt like nothing could ever go wrong. Their friends envied their bond. Neighbors called them the perfect couple. Even strangers could see the way their eyes searched for each other in a room. But life in New York moves fast and dreams cost time, something Ryan had less and less of. His company began expanding. His name appeared on projects that demanded long nights and endless meetings. At first, Emma was proud. She'd stay up waiting for him, sketching until he came home, greeting him with tired smiles and warm hugs. But gradually those nights stretched longer. Sometimes he'd come home past midnight, whisper a soft apology and fall asleep before she could even tell him about her day. She tried to understand. After all, he was doing it for them. But somewhere between ambition and exhaustion, silence started living in their home. Still, Emma held on. She believed in patience, in the love they built from nothing. On weekends, she'd surprise him with breakfast or plan small getaways, but work always found a way to interrupt. She'd watch him on his laptop during dinner, his eyes glued to the screen while she stared at the empty chair across from her heart. Yet every time he said, "Just a few more months, babe, then things will settle," she nodded, because she still believed him. She believed love could fix anything. Their Polaroid wall, once filled with laughter, began to gather dust. The fairy lights dimmed as they both forgot to turn them on. Emma started talking to the plants more than to him. At least they listened. Ryan, on the other hand, began measuring love in achievements, in bonuses, in future plans that never seemed to arrive. When she'd ask, "Do you still love me like before?" he'd kiss her forehead and say, "Of course, I'm doing all this for us." She smiled, but deep inside, a quiet voice whispered, "Then why does it feel like you're leaving me behind?" Every night she'd sit by the window, watching the city lights blink like dying stars. She missed the man who used to draw hearts on fogged glass, the one who'd show up at her office just to take her out for ice cream. Now, he was a ghost living under the same roof, physically there, emotionally gone. But she never complained. She told herself love meant sacrifice, and maybe it does. But only when both hearts are bleeding for the same reason. Then came the night that changed everything. Ryan forgot their anniversary. Not just the date, but the meaning. Emma waited at their favorite restaurant for 2 hours, staring at the door that never opened. When she returned home, she found him asleep on the couch, laptop still glowing beside him. She didn't cry. She just stood there feeling a strange calm, the kind that comes when your heart finally stops fighting. She quietly blew out the candles she had lit earlier and whispered to herself, "Maybe this is how love ends. Not with a storm, but with silence." The next morning, she smiled as if nothing had happened. She made him breakfast, listened to his usual rush of words, and wished him luck for the day. But inside, something had already shifted, a decision forming like dawn after a long night. She started writing in her journal again, sketching not interiors but emotions. Empty chairs, closed doors, a house with lights off. Each sketch was a goodbye she didn't know how to say out loud, and yet in every memory love still lingered. She'd look at his coffee cup and remember their first meeting. She'd walk past the couch and see flashes of the night they danced. Even pain carried his reflection. She wasn't angry, she was just tired. Tired of being invisible in her own story. The city outside kept moving. Taxis honking, people laughing, dreams chasing dreams. But inside that little Brooklyn house, two hearts that once beat together now moved at different speeds. Love was still there, quiet but alive, like embers waiting for air. They say marriage is about love, but sometimes love alone isn't enough. It started so quietly that neither of them noticed when love turned into routine. Ryan's alarm clock became the soundtrack of their mornings. 6:00 a.m., coffee brewing, his laptop open before the sun had even touched the curtains. Emma would wake up to the smell of caffeine instead of kisses, watching him rush out with a quick, "See you later," leaving his half-eaten toast on the plate. At first she smiled, proud of his dedication. She told herself it was just a phase, a busy season at work, a stepping stone before life got easier. But days turned into weeks, and weeks into months, and the man who once called her his everything slowly began to disappear into the glow of computer screens and corporate deadlines. The dream house that once echoed with laughter now carried the soft hum of loneliness. Every evening, Emma would light the candles in the living room, lay out 2 plates for dinner, and wait, first with hope, then with habit. The clock would tick louder with every passing hour, and by the time she heard the sound of his keys turning in the lock, the food was cold, her smile rehearsed. Hearing him typing away on his laptop, blue light reflecting on his tired face. She'd watch him from the doorway, not with anger, but with ache, wondering when he last really saw her, not just looked at her, but truly saw her. The woman who waited, who believed, who was slowly fading behind the walls they once built with love. Ryan didn't notice because he was chasing a different kind of love now. The thrill of success, the validation of achievement. He told himself that once he reached there, everything would be fine. He didn't realize he was losing here in the process. Emma started collecting small moments instead of memories. The way his coat still smelled like him, the sound of his footsteps coming up the stairs, the empty space beside her in bed that still held the shape of his absence. She'd talk to her plants at night, whispering stories about how she once met a man who promised forever, and how forever turned into a question mark. The neighbors still saw them as the perfect couple, the ones who smiled at block parties and took photos at Christmas. But no one saw the distance between those smiles, a distance wider than miles, deeper than words. One night after working for 16 hours straight, Ryan came home to find her asleep on the couch, her sketchbook open on her lap. He gently moved it aside and saw a half-finished drawing. Two figures standing on opposite sides of a bridge, reaching for each other but never touching. His eyes softened for a moment, but instead of waking her up, he kissed her forehead, turned off the lights, and went to bed alone. He didn't realize that love dies not when people stop caring, but when they stop noticing. Emma began to feel like a guest in her own life. The house that once felt alive now felt heavy, haunted by what they used to be. The fairy lights they had once hung together still worked, but she rarely turned them on. What was the point of lighting up a place where no one looked? On weekends, when he had time off, he'd scroll through his phone, answering emails, planning projects. She'd sit across from him, pretending to read, secretly studying his face, trying to find the man who once made her believe in magic. Sometimes he'd catch her looking and ask, "What?" with a faint smile. She'd reply, "Nothing," but in her heart, everything screamed. Then one evening, something shifted. She was making dinner when she heard Ryan laughing. A deep, full laugh she hadn't heard in months. She peeked into the living room and saw him on a video call with his colleague, a young woman from his office. The way he smiled, the way his eyes lit up. Emma froze. It wasn't jealousy that hit her first, it was realization. That's the smile she had been waiting for, the one that used to be hers. The call ended, and Ryan walked into the kitchen, kissing her cheek as if nothing had happened. But for Emma, something broke quietly inside her. Not because he had cheated, he hadn't, but because he no longer needed her to feel alive. The next few weeks felt like watching her own life from outside a window. Ryan was there, but his presence felt distant, polite, predictable, hollow. He started coming home later, claiming new projects, new deadlines. Emma stopped waiting. She stopped cooking dinners for two. She stopped hoping for messages or calls. Her silence became her only protest. And in that silence, Ryan found comfort. No fights, no questions, no guilt. But what he didn't know was that silence is the slowest kind of goodbye. Winter arrived. The house felt colder than ever. Emma began sketching again, not rooms or furniture, but emotions she couldn't name. One of her drawings showed a woman sitting under a leaking roof, holding a candle while everything else drowned. It wasn't hard to see who that woman was. She started visiting the old cafe where they first met, sitting at the same corner ordering the same latte, waiting for inspiration, or maybe closure. But all she found was emptiness, a reflection of the life she'd built on someone else's promises. Meanwhile, Ryan was celebrating another promotion, another raise, another success that didn't feel like one. He noticed Emma's distance but mistook it for understanding. She knows I'm doing this for us, he told himself. But what he didn't realize was that us had quietly turned into me in her memories. Every achievement felt less like a victory and more like a distraction from what he was losing. One night, Emma decided to rearrange the living room. She took down the Polaroids, not out of anger, but because the smiles in them no longer looked like theirs. As she peeled each one off the wall, tears rolled silently down her cheeks. Behind every photo was a small mark on the wall, a reminder of where happiness once lived. She didn't wipe those marks off. She left them there, like scars. Because scars tell stories, even when words fail. That same night, Ryan came home late again. He found her sitting on the floor surrounded by boxes, the fairy lights unplugged. She looked up and asked softly, "Do you remember when you said this was our dream house?" He smiled wearily. "Of course." She nodded, looking around the room. "Then why does it feel like I'm the only one living in it?" He didn't answer. He didn't know how. So he did what he always did. Kissed her forehead and said, "We'll talk tomorrow." But tomorrow never came. As he walked away, she whispered under her breath, words too soft for him to hear but heavy enough to echo through her soul. He's building our future, but losing our present. Weeks slipped by like blurred pages in a book Ryan no longer wanted to read. The apartment downtown felt more like a punishment than a fresh start. A cold, half-lit box filled with silence that screamed louder than any argument they ever had. Every morning he woke up to the same gray walls, the same empty side of the bed, the same hollow ache where her laughter used to echo. He would scroll through their old photos before breakfast, torturing himself with memories that once felt eternal. Emma holding a coffee cup and smiling in their kitchen. Emma painting the living room wall with blue streaks. Emma asleep on his chest while rain drummed softly outside, the kind that doesn't erase the pain but lets you breathe through it. He looked out the window and watched the sunrise spread light across the buildings. It was the same city, the same sky, but he was no longer the same man. He whispered to himself, "Sometimes you realize the value of love only when it's too late to keep it." And for the first time in months, he smiled, not because he was happy, but because he finally understood. Love isn't about holding on forever. It's about remembering well. Months had passed since Ryan last saw her, yet her presence lingered everywhere, in the smell of rain, in the echo of laughter from passing strangers, in the quiet hum of the city that had once been their world. He had learned to live alone, but never without her memory. Life had slowed down, softened. The walls of his apartment were no longer blank. They were covered with the fragments of what he once ignored, her drawings, her photos, the sketchbook she left behind. Each morning he made coffee for one, but poured it in the same cup she used to love, white porcelain with a chipped handle, because some habits are harder to heal than heartbreak. Then, one Saturday afternoon, while walking through the old streets of Brooklyn, he saw a poster fluttering on a cafe window. Local art exhibit, featuring works by Emma L. His breath caught. For a long second he just stood there, unable to move, afraid that seeing her name would break whatever fragile peace he had built. But curiosity, or maybe love, pulled him forward. He walked into the gallery, and the air inside felt still, filled with color yet heavy with emotion. Paintings lined the walls, each one glowing softly under golden light. And then he saw it. Her painting. It was large, powerful, and heartbreakingly beautiful. A house stood at the center, fractured, shattered into pieces, but stitched back together with veins of golden light running through the cracks. Around it, soft hues of blue and gray swirled like faded memories, but inside the cracks the gold burned warm and alive. The title read, "Home Rebuilt." Ryan froze. It wasn't just art. It was their story. The walls that once held their laughter, their dreams, their silence, now reborn into something whole again, something peaceful. His throat tightened as his eyes filled. He could almost hear her voice in the brushstrokes, calm and strong, whispering, "I made peace with what broke me." He smiled through the tears, realizing that she hadn't moved on into another love. She had simply moved forward, choosing peace over pain, healing over history. For a moment he felt proud. Proud that she found the light he couldn't give her. Proud that her pain had turned into art that touched strangers. A soft voice beside him broke the silence. "It's beautiful, isn't it?" said the gallery curator. Ryan nodded, unable to look away. "She paints from experience," the curator added. Said this one was about learning to forgive someone who never meant to hurt her. Ryan's eyes glistened. He whispered under his breath, more to himself than anyone else. "She asked for divorce, but I was the reason." The curator didn't hear him, but maybe the painting did. Because in that instant, standing before her art, he finally forgave himself too. The weight that had been pressing on his chest for months began to lift. Not because the pain was gone, but because he had finally learned to carry it with grace. He spent hours there staring at the painting, tracing the lines of gold like they were the map of his own redemption. When the gallery lights began to dim, he took one last look and smiled. A small, broken smile that carried both sorrow and peace. Outside, the evening sky blazed with orange light and the city buzzed around him. He walked slowly, breathing deeper than he had in months. At a street corner, he passed a young couple laughing, holding hands, and for once he didn't feel envy. He felt gratitude, because he finally understood what Emma had always known, that love doesn't vanish when it ends. It changes form, softens, and finds new ways to exist. That night, back in his apartment, Ryan placed her sketchbook on his desk beside a single candle. He lit it, watching the flame dance. Small but alive, just like the love that once was. He whispered to the empty room, "Thank you, Emma, for teaching me that love isn't about forever. It is about feeling it deeply while it is here." The candle flickered and he smiled, imagining somehow she knew. He opened his laptop, but this time not for work. Instead, he started writing. Not emails or reports, but a story. Their story. Every word flowed like confession, like healing. He wrote until the sun began to rise, and when he finally stopped, he felt lighter. Outside, the world was waking up. Cars passing, birds calling, life moving forward. And so was he. As the camera fades in on Ryan's face, calm, peaceful, eyes glistening in morning light, his voice echoes softly, "Love doesn't die after divorce. It just learns to live without pain." The screen fades to black. The piano swells gently in the background and soft words appear on the screen. If this story touched your heart, give it a like, share it with someone who needs to hear it, and don't forget to subscribe for more emotional stories that speak to the soul. And as Ryan walked away from the gallery that evening, the city lights shimmered through his tears, painting the streets gold, just like her artwork. For the first time in forever, he didn't feel broken anymore. He didn't feel angry or empty. He just felt thankful. Thankful that he had known a love so deep that even its ending could teach him something eternal. He realized that sometimes life doesn't give you what you want. It gives you what you need to grow. Emma had been his greatest love, but also his greatest lesson. Love had taught him joy, and loss had taught him meaning. And in that beautiful balance, Ryan found peace. He stopped by the riverside where they once dreamed together and whispered softly, "Maybe we weren't meant to last. Maybe we were meant to change each other." As the wind carried his words away, he smiled. Not the smile of a man who won, but of one who finally understood. Because the truth is, love never truly ends. It just changes its form, sometimes into art, sometimes into memory, and sometimes into strength. Moral of the story: love doesn't die after divorce. It simply learns to breathe in silence, to live without pain, and to shine through the cracks we once tried to hide. Forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting. It means finding peace in knowing you loved with all your heart. Thanks for watching. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to like the video, comment your favorite moment, and subscribe to stay connected with more real, emotional, and heart-touching stories that remind us what love, life, and forgiveness truly mean. This is not just a story. It's a feeling. Thank you for watching. See you in the next story.